My name is David Daniel Ball, and these are the headlines for Thursday, the 12th of February, 2009. Revealed the government bungling silenced fire warnings. Done deal, House Senate agrees on U.S. stimulus plan. Motorist bashed with hammer on road rage attack. Chris Brown choked Rihanna over car keys, says report. Usher's wife suffers heart attack during liposuction operation. Strike Force Juno makes 2 new murder arrests. Orbiting satellites collide in historical first. Body dragged 27 kilometers under a van. Xenophon not backing down on stimulus. Queenslanders brace for more flooding. And in comments, what do you think about this? Is this presidential or something else? Asks Greta Van Susteren. I think this is rotten and is not presidential. A front row seat? A radio announcer, Ed Schultz, who viciously and constantly trashed Senator McCain during the campaign, calling him a warmonger, and trashed Senator Clinton and former President Bill Clinton when both McCain and Clinton were rivals to then Senator Obama for the White House, was rewarded the other night with a seat and a front row seat at President Obama's news conference. That is a big reward. Is this really change? Does this change the tone of Washington when people who viciously trash you get rewarded? Do rewards for people who are nasty really bring people together? Schultz was not about policy or ideology. He was gratuitous and nasty, and now he gets the big reward. Go figure. And by the way, don't defend this by saying other presidents did it. We are looking for the change we can believe in. And in light comedy from Tim Brunero, more money for uni students, welcome. While it won't make one headline, more money to universities is always welcome, says Tim Brunero. Tim, the students are being charged money. It's not more money for the university students. When I was at university, I never had a mouthpiece, although I had to pay the union fees. I'm sure they'd have shouted me a beer if I'd showed at a function of theirs praising some ALP or Green leader, or abusing some conservative, the US or Israel. The students are being sold a pup, and you, Tim, have just bought it. Sounds fairly innocuous? Well, it is, until people die from neglect, as with the bushfires. And from Piers Akerman, Rudd stoops as low as Green policies. It had to be seen to be believed, but there was the Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd, playing politics with bushfire relief money. Obama forgets global warming from Andrew Bolt. Mark Shepard notes, last night Barack Obama promised the nation that the so-called stimulus package would create or protect 4 million jobs that America desperately needs, and offered a few examples. But there was a curious omission on his part when so-called green jobs were incorporated. In promoting the building of wind turbines, solar panels, and fuel-efficient cars, the only benefit he attributed was lowering our dependence on foreign oil. Not a single word about global warming or its intellectually dishonest surrogate, climate change. Very strange. Remember, it was just last November that the newly elected Obama told the Governor's Global Climate Summit in Los Angeles that few challenges facing America and the world are more urgent than combating climate change, adding the Gore-inspired lie that the science is beyond dispute and the facts are clear. If you can't reconcile yourself, Reconciliation Australia cannot even reconcile its own staff. The organisation announced on Monday that it had chosen Paul O'Callaghan, a former Australian High Commissioner to Samoa and previous head of the Australian Council for International Development, as its new chief executive. But many staff and Indigenous activists across the country reacted in shock and disbelief because they knew there was a strong Indigenous candidate in the field. It's heartbreaking, one staffer told The Age. I just don't get it. Many people just sat and cried after we were told. Gee, all this when Australia's top reconciler had actually spent days on working in his new special magic. Complicating the decision, the Indigenous candidate, Reconciliation Australia's Programs and Strategy Director Jason Glanville, has long been mentored by Board Chairman and Australian of the Year, Mick Dodson. Green rules, black forests. This nature-first faith must now be junked at last. Now we know. At least some lessons are being learned, if late. Victoria is set to introduce Australia's toughest building codes for bushfire-prone areas in an effort to avoid a repeat of the nation's worst natural disaster. Mr. Brumby's long-standing opposition to any change that would make housing more expensive has been rocked by the huge death toll in the town wiped out by Saturday's bushfires. And a life-saving bushfire early warning system could finally be activated after talks between John Brumby and Kevin Rudd. The Prime Minister and Premier have discussed the scheme and the need for it after a delay of almost 4 years since it was successfully tested. The Herald Sun reported yesterday that the CIWS had been stalled since 2005, while governments argued about who should pay for it and whether it would be adopted nationally. The system allows all landline and mobile phones in an area to be called simultaneously to send warning messages in an emergency. More on that delay. Victoria had wanted the early warning system operational in time for this year's bushfire season, but became so frustrated by political red tape that Mr. Brumby officially complained to the Prime Minister in the months leading up to this week's deadly firestorms, having first raised it with Mr. Rudd last June. Privacy and data security restrictions in the Telecommunications Act, combined with interstate squabbling over funding, had been delaying the scheme's introduction. The Australian understands that Telstra first sought access to the numbers in the database it manages in July 2007, but was ignored by the Communications Minister at the time, Helen Coonan. Former Prime Minister John Howard wrote to Mr. Brumby shortly before the last federal election, saying he had decided to move on the system. The election intervened and the proposal was placed on the back burner until Victorian Emergency Services Minister Bob Cameron wrote to the Federal Attorney General in January last year. The scheme was tied up in COAG for 9 months until Julia Gillard gave policy approval for the legislative change on January the 8th when she was acting Prime Minister. Cry for them, even bleed for them. The giving of so much money to the fire victims is one measure of the compassion of this nation. Here's an even more astonishing one in an email from Red Cross. You are one of 20,000 special Australians who by Tuesday had already pledged to give blood. We will be contacting you as soon as we can to make you an appointment to give a life-saving blood donation. The sheer number of responses means that this takes up to 3 weeks. Please don't kill us. What an astonishing and whimpering campaign Britain is now launching. Prominent British Muslims are being recruited to star in a government-backed advertising campaign aimed at preventing people in Pakistan from engaging in extremist activity, The Guardian has learned. I certainly hope that telling jihadists that Britain isn't anti-Muslim will work, but 2 things worry me. First, Britain hasn't even managed to convince a frightening number of its own Muslims that it's too nice to bomb. And second, when you crawl like that to men of such violence, you are likely to get not sympathy for your pleas, but contempt for your weakness. Flannery killed by our pollution. The crowing of global warming preachers has been disgraceful, but Tim Flannery's effort ranks among the worst. Ironically, Flannery's deeply ignorant piece appeared in The Guardian, published in a country now enduring its worst and possibly deadliest winter in nearly 20 years. He too is a Danny Nalia of the Green Movement. Omani editor, Jews deserved holocaust. Essa bin Mohammed al-Zajali is the chairman and the editor-in-chief of the Times of Oman, the Sultan's oldest English-language newspaper. That such a man could write this filth says plenty about the Middle East, and none of it good. I'll leave that as a link. It is utterly loathsome, and I'll include the author's email. Our own fault? There are global warming ideologues everywhere, and everywhere they seem peculiarly pitiless. Fancy thinking that the first thing you must do when so many people are dead or dying is to lecture them on their environmental sins. Guess which one is banned from Britain? Britain has banned Dutch politician Geert Wilders as a threat on the grounds that its imported Islamists will be violent if they see him. Who's running that madhouse now?